Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. And welcome to 2025. Well, for me, it is 2025 because this is the first recording of the year. It's nearly 25 years that we've been in New Zealand, and we've been running the business for as long. 25 years online, that's a long time. But that's not the question that I get from most of my clients. The one that pops up repeatedly is, how do you get so much stuff done? And in today's episode, the first one of the year, let's tackle that question. How do I manage everything? The first principle is getting faster instead of better. Back in 2024, we met with a client in Chicago, and the client called me mad. As you may have figured, it wasn't meant to be a derogatory term. The client simply meant that I was doing so many things that others couldn't keep up. Others weren't doing as much. The term mad was just her way of describing how she saw that activity level as somewhat unusual. However, back in 2004, I wasn't doing that much at all. Fast forward 2 decades, what have I achieved? I have done a watercolor painting almost every day, so that's about 4,000 paintings. Taken over 40,000 photos in the last 3 years, cooked quite elaborate meals, over 6,000 masala dosas alone, and I'm simultaneously learning 2 languages, French and Spanish. At the same time, I have almost endless chats on WhatsApp, both personal and group-based. I write books, do courses, write this podcast, answer posts in the membership site at 5000 BC, and of course there are lots of activities. Plus, I take weekends off and have enough time to waste on any given day. But why is all of the above information about the activities so important? That client in Chicago called me mad because she was comparing me to others. In most cases, when people ask, how do you achieve so much? They're usually comparing me with themselves. But they have never stopped to compare me with myself. Back in 2004, I seemed to be as busy or as productive as you see now. Yet I was doing only a fraction of the activities that I did today. If you were to go back a decade, say around 2010, you would find that I just started doing watercolors, but there was no podcast, photography, or language learning. In terms of courses and writing, the output might seem similar, but the quality is better 10, 15 years down the line. This means that the Sean of 2004 is not the same as the Sean of 2014 and is radically different from the Sean that you hear today. That's me in 2025. But it's not just about me. Aren't you doing a fair bit more than you did 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Aren't you better? Aren't you faster? So the key lies in these 2 terms, better and faster. However, the problem is the sequence in which they appear. Everyone's goal is to improve. But that trajectory is almost always a mistake. The real goal should be to become faster. Not necessarily better, but faster. If you go back a couple of decades, I took pictures and they were remarkably average. Then I decided to get better, but instead I started out with faster. How could I take the same average pictures faster? How could I create the same presentation faster? How do I write the very same type of article faster? This concept of faster isn't just a theory. It's part of our training system. If you take the article writing course, you'll notice that I'm super fussy about completing the assignment and doing so in 45 minutes. But what if you took 3 hours to write an article? Would it become better? No. Usually you just get tired. Because it's okay to spend 3 hours writing an article on Monday, and maybe you do it on Tuesday and Wednesday, but what about Thursday or Friday? And would you be able to sustain this punishing schedule for the following 10 or 11 weeks? The sheer burden of trying to be better means you'll get burnt out and you'll decide to return back to your old, easy life. You'll wrongly conclude that you're not talented and that others are better than you. They're not better, they're faster. When you take 45 minutes, you tend to do an average job. Everybody does an average job. However, you don't burn through an enormous amount of energy. You can put in 15 minutes here, 14 minutes there, and the rest of the time to complete your 45-minute task. Or, if you so wish, you can do the entire job, the entire article, in 45 minutes. Either way, you don't dread the activity when you have to do it the next day. And the next day is important because the brain learns slowly. You have to sleep, the brain has to take 20 pieces of today's puzzle and somehow put them into long-term memory. Except the brain won't move all the pieces. It will move just 2 pieces, or maybe 3, or if you're lucky, 5 pieces. So when you're learning something, it's probably better to be average, but to focus on the time. If you did that task, if you wrote that article in 45 minutes, well, how about getting it down to 43 minutes? And then, can we just push it down to 42 or 41 minutes? Every time you get that additional factor of speed, it gives you some time to do an edit. I mean, at the very core, it's giving you that extra time to fix things just that tiny little bit. But even if you don't fix anything, you're doing the same task, that same average task, and you've got it down from 45 minutes to 41. You have developed speed, and then later, much later, you start to get very good at things. In my case, I was hopeless at watercolors. I was, at best, very average at photography. I was pretty terrified of speaking to large audiences. It may be hard for you to believe it because you were not there when it all happened. You were not there initially. Not back in 1994, 2004, 2014, and now in 2025. All journeys start slowly and they seem pathetic. I'm at that stage with French, for example. I was told that not only was I saying some words incorrectly, but I had the wrong tone. As for Spanish, I know enough to read a page or even a small booklet. I can have tiny conversations, but speaking even semi-fluently is out of the question, but only for now. I am very much in the getting faster mode. In a year or two, I'll have enough information in my head to speak faster, to think faster, respond faster, and at the same time I'll also get better, until eventually it will seem like I'm getting a lot done, but only to the outside world. Hence the first principle is to get a lot done, but to do it faster. Speed matters. Look at anything that you do in the day and ask yourself, how can I do this faster? Can you learn to chop onions faster if you're cooking a dish? If you're writing an email, what could you do to make it faster? Even a tiny smidgen faster. This doesn't suggest that you need to speed up all your activities in life. Cutting onions in slow motion is a real treat. However, having the capacity to do things faster, that's what counts. Speed does make a difference. However, it's just one factor. When the client asked me, how do you manage to get everything done? My first answer was, you have to get faster, then better. The sequence matters. Of course, that's not the only thing. There is a second factor, which is spotting and swatting the recurring headaches. Let's find out what it's all about. The problem with most people is that they want to be more productive. I, on the other hand, want to be more lazy. Or to put it another way, I want to have lots of time to waste. What would I do with all of that time? Maybe I'd talk to the barista, maybe take a nap, read a book, paint. I'm happy being an adult and finding meaning in my work, but I'm also thrilled at being a 5-year-old and doing things that just waste time. In order to waste time, you have to examine what takes time. If you drove an old car and you wanted to increase the fan speed, all you had to do was to reach down and drag a knob to the right. That simple act increased the fan to the desired speed. Electronics and computers drive modern cars. Hence, if you wanted to increase the fan speed, you might need to tap on a screen, choose an option, then drag the slider to that desired speed. 3 steps instead of 1. Technology doesn't always simplify lives as we go through our day. We deal with 3 steps here, 3 steps there, and suddenly we have 100 extraneous things to remember and execute. But where there are complications, there's also usually a shortcut. And in many cases, the shortcut is not a single knob, but is a chain of events that can reduce the time spent on the activity. If only we knew all the shortcuts, right? We don't, and we can't know them all. As we go through life, things change around us all the time. We could read manuals, go bleary-eyed on YouTube, and we'd still be behind. You and I, we couldn't keep up with the changes 20 years ago, and the future isn't making things easier. Which is why I have a benchmark. The benchmark is, am I doing this activity several times a day? Am I doing this activity several times a week? If so, there must be a shortcut, and I will not rest until I find it. This shortcut isn't always related to work. It could be something personal. For instance, about 15 years ago, Renuka had allergies. She'd start the day quite normally and then find something would trigger those allergies. She'd have to go home, take a tablet. That tablet made her drowsy. She'd then have to sleep the entire afternoon. And when she woke up, she would be fine. And let's say she had this problem only 10 times a year or 20 times a year. That's still quite a lot. The medication is not a shortcut. Something else is. We had to find a way to get rid of those allergies without the medication, without the sleeping, without the having to just go and have a nap because the medication made you drowsy. In your case, you might not have allergies, but maybe you have kids, and maybe you have battles with your kids. You know what's good for them, you want to protect them, but they have a plan and a mind of their own. They get into unwanted trouble, they won't cooperate. At this point, you're wasting a lot of time wondering how this problem can be solved. And the way most parents solve the problem is to tell them, you should do this, you should do that, you know better than to. And there's a big tug-of-war between you and the kids, but there are no winners. What's worse is that it's all taking time and happening with a recurring frequency. You see the problem, don't you? We started this piece with a small problem, namely how to increase the fan speed. However, in a day, there are many new and recurring problems. A one-off problem is primarily out of our control, but a recurring problem needs to have a solution. It needs to have a shortcut. If we decide to reduce that problem or eliminate that problem, then we're able to achieve our goals by doing little or nothing at all. If we return to the car, the solution may be to press a button and say, increase fan speed to 5. In the case of Renuka's allergies, the search was more prolonged. However, we were able to find someone who, without any blood samples, without any medication, solved the allergy problem. The allergies have never returned,
and it's been almost 2 decades. When arguing with the kids, the problem might be, you should do this, you should do that. Kids don't care to take that kind of advice, so why would your kid be so different when faced with all of should do this and should do that? In most cases, most situations, even hostage situations, the problem isn't solved by telling the terrorist what to do. Instead, hostage negotiators often use mirroring. They ask a lot of precise questions. And you might have to dig deeper into how to deal with your home terrorist, but there is usually a starting point that leads to an enduring shortcut. All of these seem to save you time. However, for most of us, the problem isn't about time but energy. We all have time. We know that we have time because we end up on our phones, social media, Netflix, Hulu, or whatever. The bigger problem is that we run out of energy. We can't be bothered to do anything more, even if we have several hours to spare. The battle with the kid, the fiddling with the idiotic air conditioning knob, it successfully drains us of the remaining joules of energy. If the problem recurs, it's something that has to be fixed. So what I do is I look for recurring problems. If something shows up frequently enough, I start looking for a shortcut. That shortcut isn't always easy to find, but in most cases, the solution exists. For me at least, it's important to find and to fix the recurring problem. If not, I will always be running out of time, always be running out of energy. That's no fun at all. So that's the second tip, to manage things in a slightly different manner. There's more, of course, but let's keep it for the second episode of this podcast. Let's just summarize what we've covered so far. In the first part of this podcast, we talked about getting faster instead of better. We have these two options, faster and better, and most of us go for better. I think that's a mistake. I think it's better to be average to begin with and to be faster at being average. If you're cutting onions and you're doing a hopeless job of it, at least do the hopeless job faster. Maybe it took you 10 minutes, then you got it down to 9, and now there's a finite stop at 6 minutes. That's when you get better. Each of the slices is exactly the same width. So you've got faster, then better. The second concept is looking at the recurring headaches. When I have to do something several times a week or several times a day, I will find a solution. That solution allows me to save time, but mostly it allows me to save energy. So then I can afford to waste more time. I can take more time off during the day, take the weekends off, and as you know, 3 months off every single year. You just have to go through your day and see what kind of problem showed up yesterday and the day before, or if you're sitting at the computer and you're doing the same action that's taking you X amount of time, is there a shortcut? Yes, there is, and you just have to look for it. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What's the one thing that you can do today? It's really hard to choose between these two, but I would still say faster. If you get faster at something, that saves you an enormous amount of time and energy. So yeah, faster instead of better would be my choice. And that brings us to the end of the first part of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. If you're listening to this podcast in sequence, which is you're listening to it almost the day it's being launched, then you'll be on time for the article writing course. Every few years, we have the live article writing course that's conducted by me. And recently, the debate has been about AI and how it'll change everything. And after we've had the initial shakeup, we realized that AI can't really write good articles, not right now, and we don't know about the future. Having that control to be able to write really well, to create stories, to create that structure, that is a skill. That is something that we need to have. As kids, we want to write, we want to draw, we want to speak. And if you're interested, go to psychotactics.com/article writing. There are some goodies. And judge for yourself. Other than that, you might want to join 5000 BC. That's at 5000bc.com. And the reason for that is that you might have missed this course, but you still want to improve your business. You still want to improve bits of your article writing. Well, that's where you'll find resources as well as advice from me and from the rest of the members at 5000bc.com.
And that's pretty much it from Psychotactics Land. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye.